In the beer world, which is something we know something about, there's a company that's coming out, they've got, new packaging. I will tell you as a fact that North Americans do not care about packaging. There's package people care about packaging. Sometimes internally people in companies care about packaging, but nobody cares about the Pantone color for this magenta versus that magenta. And they don't care if, now you can see the Chalice cup on the side of the can. Packaging is not where it is. Where it is story. And story is a combination of what is the experience that somebody shares with you, and do you fulfill on that experience, right? My 8-year-old loves the Hallmark musical cards with the giggly things. Now that his grandparents know that he loves those, that's what they send all the time, because he said, oh, Mimi, I really like this, and now we get those, and I have no idea what the margin is on them, but I'm hoping it's super huge. Because my mother would send to my son like 10 or 12 of these things a year because he always laughs about it, because he shared a story. That's how you sell stuff in North America today, period.
That is my friend Ted Wright, the founder and CEO of Fizz in Atlanta. We'll bring him in here in just a moment. Just a moment. I have a little bit of housekeeping to do before we do that. But first of all, wherever you may be, welcome to Think Northwest. Now, my name is Doug Zanger. I am the executive director of Think Northwest. If you are a member, thank you for your support. If you are not yet a member, reach out to us. Zanger at ThinkNW.org. That's usually the easiest way in. You can also get us on the WhatsApp. And this is me stalling for time to figure out where I put the phone number for you to connect with me on WhatsApp. And I'm going to tell you right now. So as a former radio guy, I'm going to say the number a few times. 206-809-0583. Again, that number again. 206-809-0583. Catch us on WhatsApp. And that's a direct line to me and the rest of the team here at Think Northwest. Again, mention a little housekeeping. We'll get to Ted here in just one moment. But coming up, March 14th, that is Tuesday next week. Nike's former historian Scott Reams joins us for a conversation about Nike's history and influence in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. On Tuesday, March 21st, it's our Think Northwest Talent Talks. The economy, nobody really knows exactly where it's going, but we have some expertise in the house on this one. Brooks Gilley, founder of 52 Limited, and his team will talk about how talent can navigate economic downturns, the things to expect and the things to help prepare for. And then we go live in person in Seattle. It's our second Extremely Happy Dog Walk in Seattle on Wednesday, March 22nd, 4:30 p.m., sponsored by Portland Pet Food Company. You join us outside at Mechanism. It is very near the water by Elliott Bay, so we're going to take a nice little walk. I'll be bringing my little floofy dummy up, Belle. She is in the picture if you take a look at the invite. And then the day after that is the Extremely Happy Hour, also taking place at Mechanism. This is Thursday, March 23rd, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then one more Think Northwest Now at the end of the month. We got a lot going on in March. So you want to get coverage in Ad Week. This is how you start building your earned media muscle. Our good friend and I would say kind of native. He's not really a native Pacific Northwesterner, but Kyle O'Brien, editor at Adweek, spent a number of years here in Portland, will be joining us as well. So lots going on. Think Northwest, we got it cooking. And that's what we call a professional broadcast segue into our guest. How'd you like that, Ted?
I love it, Zanger.
Yeah, who used to be a DJ or a terrible DJ?
Oh, I did college radio as well.
Oh my God.
Crescent Show, WWHSF.
Oh my goodness.
All the music from Boston to Austin and all the points in between. Here's a twin spin from our good friends in Athens, REM. Here they are with Radio Free Europe.
Did you hang out with REM? Because you're from Georgia.
So weirdly, I did. So I graduated high school in 85. Mm-hmm. So, and I'd gone away for high school. So the guy who was our proctor in our dorm, he was playing the original Hibtone version of Radio Free Europe when I was a sophomore in high school. And I'm walking down the hall and I heard it and I was like, like dog ears. And I'm
Right.
just like, okay, what is that? And it changed my life. I mean, sonically, they work for me. I know other people like bands, like, oh, I like the music, like the thing, and yay, the Juggalos or whatever. I really love the music. And from that took me into that whole Athens scene. So if anybody's out there wants to ask a question about Kilkenny Cats or any of the other obscure Athens bands from the mid 80s to the mid 90s, that's my CMJ
Yeah.
kind of thing, baby.
Yeah.
That's my
I
that's
think
my stuff.
Matthew Sweet had a couple of cups of coffee down there. So
Yeah,
yeah.
Matthew Sweet, Love Tractor.
Hmm.
In fact, I just went right before Christmas. There was a surprise REM show in Athens, and dude, Mitch Easter from Let's Active was up on stage, and they couldn't get him to leave. He played like 7 songs. He's like, no, no, wait, I got another one, and
Oh, that's
I
funny.
just like,
That's like,
all
no,
right,
we're good.
sure,
Yeah,
have your
we're
time.
good. We're good. All right. So before this turns into like alt music, KEXP also, if you're KEXP in Seattle, let's give a little shout out to the Pacific Northwest there.
I like that.
But we are here to talk about word of mouth marketing. Now, there are a lot of things that we can talk about in this topic, but we will drill down into some specifics. And most importantly, we will be giving really critical advice to people joining us and also people who are catching this after the fact as well. Now, I want to go back to how you even got started in word of mouth marketing, how this entire journey even began.
All right, so I'm at the University of Chicago for business school. It was a lot of fun, but we're a pretty big herd of nerd. And so back in the super late 90s, you didn't want a lot of sun to hit your monitors because it would all burn them out. And so we took that seriously. And so we had no windows and they kept the lights off. So the ambient light was basically what's coming from the screens. So one day I'm sitting there and I'm writing a paper, and this is back in the day. For those of you, this is like post Boolean script, but right when Ask Jeeves was showing up. And so, as anyone knows the history of early search engines, they were not particularly very good. And so I'm using it, and I'm swearing at this inanimate object, the computer, because it's giving me stupid answers to my queries. And the person to my right leans over and says, "Hey, have you used Google?" Now, I'm a math guy, mathlete from back in the day, so I knew what a Google was mathematically, but I did not know it as a website at the time. So they gave me the whole address, and I'm old enough, which they started with HTTP and went from there. And then I used it, and it immediately worked. And I was like, what? That's so awesome. So 20 minutes later, I shared the story to my person to my left because I heard that them struggling. And by the time 4 hours later, I was done writing this paper, I stood up and the ambient light in the room had changed from red, which was kind of the Ash Jeeves color, to white, which is what the Google screen was. And I was like, huh, how did that work? Because in my home, where I was raised, my mother's a scientist and my father's an engineer. So how things work and why that worked that way, that's just what table discussion was.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured it out, and I also TiVo was happening at the same time, just to bring up all the old tech companies at once, and that got adopted across campus without any advertising, as did Google. So I really wanted to know why that worked, and so I took my second year of business school, tore it apart, and kind of figured it out. And then our very first client, famously, was Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, and we took that from a dead brand to the dominant sub-premium beer in the United States, and we did it pretty quickly.
So there was really no blueprint or roadmap for this. And where I'm going with this too is there are practices or mediums or platforms in our industry that sometimes people would say, I was in radio for a long time. They would say it's vintage or it doesn't have as much power or it's not as sexy. All of that. And we'll talk about that in a second, but I want to go back though, because it seems like there was really no platform, and word of mouth seemed to be almost, oh, we're going to do all this advertising over here. And if there is word of mouth, I guess that's okay.
Right. So previous to me in the modern era, and here's crazy insane Ted who's like, yes, I have a better idea. Everybody come follow me. And only the people that were really hurt and didn't have any other choices were our original followers, right? So I think word of mouth is at least 3,000 years old. I mean, I stopped looking any further back there. They have a great archaeology department. If you've watched it in the movies, at the University of Chicago. So I went back and found old tablets in Sanskrit that basically said, hey, if you want a really good pot, Ahmed makes a great one. And if you have that same one, it's basically a tweet, it's basically a text. It's just carved in stone, sandstone, and it is, 3,000, 3,200 years old. So the reality is that it was for a long time, it was the thing. And then Gutenberg shows up with the printing press, and then there's newspaper, and then there's radio, and then there's television. So there's an interregnum in 3,000 years. There's sort of 1930 till about 1990 here in the United States, where word of mouth is basically supplanted by broadcast. Now, the average North American gets hit with about 14,000 commercial messages a day. Takes 17 seconds for a human to process that message. 17 seconds times 14,000 is almost as many hours as there are in the day. So you've got people just getting blasted and they can't do everything else in their day and pay attention to commercials. So oftentimes they just block out the commercials. Then you've got this other macro trend that really started to happen in kind of the late 90s and it's continued and getting more and more aggressive, is that nobody thinks they have more money and more time than they used to have. They think they have less and less. So you combine that with how much they're getting deluged with people like Edelman who do the trust barometer, and they'll tell you that 7 out of 10 North Americans don't believe that brands tell the truth in their advertising. And those same people say 8 out of 10 North Americans, they trust to share information with themselves as long as they're their friends. So what's happened is the power that broadcast used to have, which was dominant and unassailable, over time has degraded, and it has been replaced in people's minds by conversation between them and their friends, of which some of it happens face to face, like we're doing now, some of it happens online. McKinsey will tell you that a fifth of all sales in the United States, everything, B2C, B2B, everything, 1/5 of all sales are sold solely and only because one person shares a conversation with somebody else. Those conversations, 80% of those are between people who already know each other. Those conversations, 70% are face-to-face, only 30% are online. That's just the math.
Right. And McKinsey, which
they don't
rely
suck,
on.
right? They know
Right.
they know their elbow from other parts of their body, right? And look, the ANA has agreed with that. The AMA has agreed with that. It's really, quite honestly, Doug, it's really hard to find a brand that has really grown solely on broadcast since the year 2000.
Right.
If you think those things have
point,
grown, they've really grown because people have conversations with each other about, oh my God, this thing is so awesome. Here's why. And then you have the conversation, you go try the product, and you're like, oh wow, I really do like this. My Mac really does work really well, as opposed to my IBM ThinkPad. I'll just go get one of those.
I had a Toshiba satellite. It weighed about 1,000 pounds. It was not by choice. That's what I was given. God, it was so heavy. My back still hurts thinking about it. And I will ask you about low threshold products versus high threshold products a little later, because there is a very big distinction there.
Let's do it.
And you've talked a bit about, what's changed, and obviously digital being a big piece of this. And there is a tremendous amount of clutter. And I think to any person, again, this idea that, okay, well, we're working on this campaign for, again, Pacific Northwest, let's just contextualize it. We're working on this thing for Dairy Gold or whatever. And, we know we have this we have all of these things. So where do you even start? Where is even the best place to start with word of mouth to work towards breaking through, understanding the context? Because You do mention that broadcast and word of mouth can work together very effectively and very well.
Sure, absolutely.
But let's start with the very basics. I'm a creative, I'm a buyer, I'm a strategist, I'm an agency owner. I'm an agency owner in Portland. I'm hearing about this word of mouth stuff. How do I even get started?
So I think the first thing you think about and you have to realize is that sales is how we're going to get measured. I mean, it's fine to go drink half-ass rosé in southern France, once a year. But really how we're all getting judged is we get judged on how we're impacting sales. And so the other thing to remember is that at this point, conversation between two people who know each other is the number one driver of sales. So the question, if I was an agency person or a strategist or a creative or anybody else out there in the Pacific Northwest or anywhere else, is how can I take the resources that I have and create the most conversations possible? So just so we're clear for everyone who's listening or watching this, at our shop, we are agnostic about the tool. Like the only tool we haven't taken advantage of in the last 10 years is skywriting. So we have yet to do a sky. We've done blimps. We've been involved with Super Bowl ads. We've been involved with newspaper, with radio. There's nothing that we haven't been involved with. Our question is always, given who the target is and given what the story is, what tools can I use to create the most conversation possible? We also know that face-to-face is a more efficient use of transmitting information than broadcast because it's more trusted and it's more personal. So finding a bunch of advocates, which we know how to do, which by the way, you don't pay them and there is no list like, hey, come be an advocate. That's like, hey, are you cool? Come hang out. I mean, everybody thinks they're cool. Everybody thinks they're smart. Everybody thinks they're funny. Everyone's like, well, I talk to other people. Advocates are a very specific breed, which we can talk about in a while. But if I'm somebody in the Pacific Northwest and I'm working in an agency, I'm thinking about this word of mouth thing. I'm hearing word of mouth, but I need to be thinking conversation. So all activity now is about driving conversation. And anybody who talks to you about anything else is smoking their own press release. And you should not work around them because they will infect you with whatever, and then they'll be gone.
Right. So you said conversation. Let's talk about some of the strategies that work and things that don't work or get people stuck when it comes to building effective word of mouth strategies. What have you seen, not just from what you do and what your agency does, but what are some examples of strategies that you think have worked and things that don't work or get people stuck when it comes to building strategies around word of mouth?
All right. So I think the first thing we were building a strategy around word of mouth, I think it's about matching the story up to the target. So a story that is most likely to get shared between two people who know each other has three qualities to it. It is authentic, it is interesting, and it is relevant. Or if you like acronyms, does it have air? And particularly for our friends in Portland, there's a lot of history behind air. And so just remember that. So is it authentic? Is it interesting? And is it relevant? And you have to be really hard on yourself. You have to really say, look, is it interesting? You have to close your eyes and you have to pretend you're at brunch on a Sunday and slightly hungover and you've brought somebody that you love. And the person that you love has invited two other couples, one of which you don't know. And you're going to start telling your brand story about whatever it is you're working on at this brunch. Mm-hmm. As you're telling it, are you imagining that your spouse, your loved one is giving you that, that relationship eye roll, or even getting kicked under the table because nobody wanted the Ithaca hummus salesman to be at brunch? We're just here to be friends. Or do you bring up Ithaca hummus and you say, oh, this thing will change your life and here's why. So they don't cook any of the stuff. It's all cold pressed. And so it is amazingly tasty. Like they have one that's supposed to taste like buffalo ranch and chicken wings, and it tastes like buffalo ranch and chicken wings. And I don't know what they do to it, but it's amazing and you should go try it. And then people say, oh, well, okay, I like hummus. And next time they're in the store, like, hey, didn't Ted say something about this? whatever, this hummus thing. And they try it and they're like, oh my God, this Kalamata olive does really taste like Kalamata olives. This is amazing. I don't care that it's $6 for a little thing as opposed to Sabra, which is like $4 for a big thing. This is really tasty. And I got the extra $2, so I'm good. And they tell two friends, and so on and so on. And they tell two friends. And the spread rate for those people on the strategy side, on the math side of agencies, spread rate for an advocate, their story will get spread 8 factorial times within that advocate's social graph within a year. So 8 factorial for all the rest of us is 40,370. So I tell Doug tells 2 people, and his wife tells 2 more people, and so on and so on, through 8 generations of the storytelling is in excess of 40,000 shares. The rest of us, the other 90% of the world that don't have this advocate personality, our stories are shared 3 factorial times or 6 times within that same year. So the reality is 1 North American in 10 tells the other 9 what to buy about everything. And so these are the realities that you're dealing with. So Doug, the question you started with was, what do I need to be thinking? I, in the creative space, need to be thinking, how does my stuff create more conversations?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yes. I mean, and those numbers, and I think that's the other piece of this too, Ted, is that people don't necessarily, those numbers are astonishing, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, it's like, okay, that's amazing. The question then becomes here, okay, I'm armed with this data. I'm armed with all of this stuff. Now, I know that you've done this talk before, and so you can condense this into a few tips. But how do you sell word of mouth marketing to your boss? How do you sell it to your client? How do you articulate the importance of work? Like, we have all of these things going on here, Mr. Tillamook brand person.
Oh, yes, let's do amazing cheese. All right, so let's talk about amazing cheese. So if we were talking to the CEO of Tillamook, then I think the first thing we go is say, okay, what really is your story? So and we would show up in the meeting with, okay, this is what we think your story is, and this is why. And we would also match this with, this is what your creatives, this is what our creatives come up with. This is what your target is. So this is the target and this is the story. And the activations, the marketing that we're going to do in between those two things, that's to get more people together to tell the story. That's to remind them. So, basically word of mouth marketing is a triangle. And, on one side.
You want me to show you the slide? You want me to show you the slide?
If you want to show the slide, that'd be cool.
Let's do this.
All right, there you go. All right, so look at there. All right, so basically, this is, if you ever decide to get a word of mouth marketing tattoo, the triangle that's your tattoo to have, right? And I know after this, you're all thinking, sweet, let's go right out there and let's get a tattoo. We're going down to the Pearl. We're getting tattoos. All right, so story, target, and goal all have equal validity and all need to be right and all need to be matched and help each other. And the thing that ties all those 3 things together in the middle is activations. And that's the stuff you're doing. So let's come back on screen. Let's take this off, Doug, and we'll go back on screen. Okay. So when you're going and talking to people, when I'm going to talk to people about this, I say, here is the reality. The reality is that North Americans are buying based on conversation they're having with their friends. Particularly true and under $50. So if it costs less than $50, so we're all at a bar and I happen to think Fortaleza tequila is really tasty. And so I see it's on the menu. And if we're all at a bar, I might say, hey, I'm getting Fortaleza. Do you want one? And people are like, what's a Fortaleza? I'm like, oh my God, it's the best tequila and here's why. And you should try some. And you're like, $6, sure. I'm going to drink some sort of tequila. So let me just have one of these. Or a bourbon, or whatever it is that I'm doing. When you drink that thing, you consume that thing, you use that baby carriage, you use that baby Bjorn, and the story that your friend told you matches the experience, then that just becomes something you will buy, however many you're going to buy in forever. Where digital shows up is in that $50 to $500 range.
This is what I was going to ask you, but please continue.
All right, so here's where so for $50, nobody you say, we're in the bar and you say, 4 ladies tequila. You don't take your phone and go, oh, let me look this up. You're like, yeah, Doug knows about this stuff. He and his wife are always going down to Mexico. I'll just buy one of these. Oh my God. This is
not accurate, but okay for
okay. I'm just making
creative liberties. Yes.
Right. Creative liberties. I don't know what is there a warrant out for you in Mexico? You just want to make sure that
I can neither confirm nor deny. Please continue.
So between $50 and $500, so it's getting a little expensive. So like there's in Portland, there's this sushi restaurant that's, all these people are there and it's, it's a couple $100 to go. And so Zanger tells me about this thing and I'm like, I don't know, $200. And I know Zanger's a good dude, but whatever. And so what you do is you take your phone. Some people use a laptop, vast majority of people, and you look it up and you read the reviews and you look at the pictures and you're like, okay, does that match the story that Zanger just told me? Oh, well, it does or it doesn't. And if it does, then that's confirming. And then people go off and they go buy, right? If it doesn't, then they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So it's either, depending on who you are as a person, it's either more research or more conversation with other people, but you're definitely not buying right now. Costs more than $500, all the way up to infinity dollars. You take all that information you got from the digital and all that information you got from your first conversation, and you go and you take all that and you combine it all, and you go take it to a bunch of other people, and you say, hey, I heard this about this thing. What do you know? And the best example I have for that is college choice. So if anybody out there is watching this and you've been through this with your child, you're like, why are we at Oregon State? Well, there's the in-state tuition part, which is awesome. Okay, check price. But also, I have some friends who went here and they had a lot of fun. And so I went down to Beaverton and I checked it out or went at wherever it is. It's not
Corvallis. You were in the ballpark.
I went to Beaverton and then went left.
Yes, you did.
Which I think is how I went when my son looked at Oregon State.
Right.
And so we go down and we looked at this thing and you're like, okay, this matches. And if you think about this, think about all the advertising that any college or university does. We send out brochures. We're going to have billboards on the side of the road. We're going to do television ads. We're going to make sure that we send something to, the NCAA when our team is playing football. It turns out that everybody makes their college decision because they go and they talk to their friends in the beginning, they make their list. And sometimes those people are experts, your college counselor, your parents, or whatever. But and it's also your friends, you make a list and then you go check it out. And when you're checking it out, you're going and experiencing it, but you're also, having conversations with people like, what is it really like here? And then you go and the next phase is you go on your laptop or on your phone and you look it all up and you look at all the ratings, the Greek life ratings, the professor life ratings, the campus ratings, and you go look at all that stuff and you combine that. And if there's tension, you go take that to other people and who you think know what's going on. And you say, hey, I thought this about Oregon State. These people said this thing. You've been to Oregon State. You're my college counselor. You're my pastor. You're my Boy Scout leader. You're whatever it is that I'm trusting in you. What do you think? And that is how choice is made. And so it is also that way about if you're moving. So all of us who have moved to the Pacific Northwest in our life, we're like, okay, where in Portland am I going to live? Well, it depends on how old are your kids and how much money do you have? And like, what are you interested in school and living? You can get all that information digitally. You would never in your life just go online and look at all these reviews and say, okay, I'm going to live here. You go, you visit, you experience it, and you talk to a ton of people. What is it really like to live in this neighborhood versus this neighborhood, this side of the river versus that side of the river?
Yep. All right. A reminder to everybody watching right now, you may pop some questions in as well. So in the comments, please feel free to pop in some comments if you have questions for Ted. But let's go back again. I'll ask it again. Short. No. You answered it, but I'm reiterating. Now let's move over to this side. Okay, that sounds great, but we have to hit our quarterly number. That seems like it's a lot of work. That seems like it's a lot of this. That seems like it's a lot of that.
Yes.
How do you get past How do you get past that objection? And then what are other objections around word of mouth that you've experienced that you've been able to address and get past?
So depends on, for the first question, for the first objection, oh, it seems like a lot of work, or it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of time. Depends on how I know the person. So if they're my friend and they're taking a new CMO role, I said, dude, this is the only way forward. Do this or die. I mean, seriously, name significant. Every brand you can name that did it a different way, I can name 5 that did it the other way, that did it this way, that did this conversation side. Hell, Steve Jobs is going out and hiring, I need to hire an advocate. This is back in the day. Like, he's doing this in the 80s, y'all. There's not a brand that anybody can really name that has significantly grown on the base of broadcast in the last 25 years. They just don't exist anymore. Now, does that mean that broadcast isn't awesome? No. What you need now is you need the combo. So you need conversation to get people to know about stuff, discover stuff, to be most trusted. And ads in all the broadcast is to remind people, their best use is to remind people like, oh yeah, Deschutes beer is really good. Yeah, did my friend Neil, he loves it up there. He drives up to Bend and goes and drinks beer down there, and he's had it before. And I see this FSI, or I see this Shelf Talker, and so I'm going to go, let me get one of those. Nobody, I say nobody, because remember, it's America. So somebody liked the TV show so much that they named their children Walker and Texas Ranger. But not a whole lot of people go into liquor stores and go, hey, this Shelf Talker says it got 94 points in something that I don't even know what that means, but that's better than 92 points, so I'm going to go buy this. Some people do, yes. And some people buy on price and other things. But the vast majority of us at this point in the United States and in North America, don't forget our friends in the Canadas, the vast majority of their purchasing decision, their funnel, is related around conversations that they have had about that product or service with people that they already know. And this includes the B2B stuff. What is my HVAC unit? What is my air handling for my huge warehouse that I'm building? To what tequila should I bring to my boss's house who I know likes tequila, right? It is conversation rules, and everything else drools right now. Mm-hmm. So when asking, what are you going to do about this? And how are we going to work on this? If you are broadcast heavy, here's the reality. And there's a great study that Pepsi, Weight Watchers, Fallon, and maybe like 3 other brands all paid to be a part of. If you'll run a word of mouth campaign in conjunction with your broadcast campaign, your broadcast KPIs will jump between 15 and 25%. Why? Because your broadcast has to work so much less hard. When Doug and Ted have already talked about this, whatever this thing is, and I see an ad about this thing, or I see PR about this thing, or I see a billboard, or I see a snow globe with this thing in it, I'm like, oh yeah, and that thing that Doug was telling me about, and he told me this. And advocates, these people who share these stories that spread like 40,000 times, they share these stories because they love to share it, and you don't need to pay them. Mm-hmm. So to quote the great and mighty Rashad Tabakawala, formerly number 2 Publicis, now doing his own thing, today we need to market through people, not to people.
That's a good point. We love Rashad.
We do love Rashad.
Yes.
He's a great person and has always been super nice to people he didn't need to be nice to, because we were all
yeah.
I mean, he really didn't. I mean,
Exhibit A. All right. No.
yeah. When he was mighty, you could call him.
He always gave the time. He always gave the time.
Could get
always
10
gives
minutes.
the time. Yeah, he always gives the time. No, he's
always gives the
guy.
time.
Question from our fans.
Oh, good Lord.
This is really interesting stuff, but what data points can be used for tracking?
Measurement.
The old KPI.
So there's lots. Let me give you all, I'll tell you, the worldwide expert on measurement for word of mouth is a guy named Ed Keller. Keller. He wrote not only the book, but he wrote the second book. So he wrote the books on measurement. So for those of us in marketing every day and in advertising every day where we have to prove out everything, whatever media mix model you're using, whatever math you're using, you can plug word of mouth into that. And it takes a little extra effort, but you can do that and it will fly and be mathematically valid as everything else. On the measurement side, here's the one downfall for word of mouth. It is more expensive to measure than other forms because you're having to track people's conversations as opposed to being able to sit on top of the API and just watch how many little things like go by. Now, the Association of National Advertisers, as well as the American Marketing Association, will tell you that at least 50% of all the digital data that you get is fake. Right? Mark Pritchard just had a fit like 3 years ago. He said, look, if I get any more of this fake crap, y'all are done. Like, we're just done. We're ruining this industry because we're building on all these numbers that are just fake. Not false, not wrong, just not true. Like, don't really exist. You're just making this up from whole cloth. So that is the answer to the measurement question. It is a little bit more expensive and you have to do a little bit more work, but it's completely fundamentally sound. I mean, look, all these companies have used it very successfully for a long time. In our shop, I always like to say that people buy on the hope and they re-sign on the results. Mm-hmm. So not to just be patting my back, but I have a big team that is there and they're awesome. So our average client lasts 9.5 years. That's the average. And we've been in business 25 years. So 24.5, we'll be 25 in May. So it works and smart, rational people stay for a long time.
Let's talk about one thing you got cooking right now, which is Shoney's right now, right? Is that the big one that you got going right now? Wait, what's the one you got going?
Shoney's. Oh, yeah, we got all kinds of stuff going on.
Wait, what's the one with Stuckies? Sorry, pecan roll. Like, so it kind of started. So this is a good point. Like, this is where I remember it's like the pecan rolls are legendary, and that's where it started, right? Like, to me, I'm like, oh yeah, Ted did that, and I got the name wrong, but at least I was in the ballpark. I got the ST part. But like, it's a great story because it's reviving something that's familiar and pleasant. There's a visceral reaction to that.
There is. So for those of you who are not familiar, there's a company back in the 30s that started. It was called Stuckies, and they became famous for something called the pecan log roll, which is pecans and nougat and all this yummy deliciousness all together in the same place. And it grew and grew until the 80s, and then they sold it, and the company who bought it basically ran it into the ground. So Stephanie Stuckey, granddaughter of the founder, has purchased this brand, and she literally came and knocked on our office building door, which is strange because we don't ever open that door. Like, if somebody's knocking, that means they're trying to sell us something and we're not buying anything. But my EA was walking through and she's like, "Can I help you?" It's like, "Does Ted Wright work here?" And she's like, "Yes." And then, she's bringing in lunch for all of us. And it was very nice. It was her time. Sometimes I go, sometimes she goes. It's always one of us. Anyway, it was her. She was going. And so she was out, and she brought Stephanie in, was telling the story. And the point about for everybody, so Stephanie and I and another person who's very involved with a company his name is RG Lamar. So RG does pecans. I do the marketing, the strategy, and Stephanie is the voice and the face. And she's awesome. So basically, we've changed this from $1 million in revenue to $20 million in revenue in the last 30 months. And we've done it all in the back of word of mouth. And, there's no other and we're getting great press. So for those of you who are listening who are in PR, like New York Times twice, Washington Post once, the Today Show, we're doing all these things. And we said, okay, so who cares? What do they care about what we do, and how can we share that story as much as possible? So Stephanie and I are, we have a calendar and we do all the things that everybody else does, except we pay attention to having conversation, not paying attention to what's going out in the ether, or how many billboards, or who's supposedly watching what TV show on CBS. Like, we care about conversations. And so we built a nice little business, and just to brag on the team at Stuckey's, like, production is 100% sold out until July. Like, everything that we're making between now and the beginning of July is for stuff that people have already ordered. Like, huge retailers are coming to us now and saying, we would like to buy this. And we, over the last year, we have bought a bunch of equipment, and we're building a new building, and we are, we will have that kind of production capability. No ads ever, no anything, just conversation. Just conversation.
Is there one like through line? Was there one piece of the threat? Was it nostalgia? I mean, obviously the product's great. I mean, listen, the pecan to me can do no wrong. It
is America's. So just to be a pecan nerd for a second, it is America's only indigenous snack nut. Everything else is an invasive species.
Okay. All right. That's good to know.
Just so y'all know. So America.
Right. Okay.
All right. So let's talk about, so ask your question again.
So so you're saying broadly word of mouth is working. Yes.
Yes.
Were there some particular through lines on that? And so, what I do for a living besides this is what we call strategic narrative. So I'm always interested in what's the specificity within this broader construct. And you can be real quick on this, because I do have a couple more questions coming from our audience today.
All right. So real quick, we started. So freedom and fun are the two through lines. But like, you can't sit up there. Well, you can yell freedom, but it gets a little my pillowy fast. So we're like,
right.
So we're like, okay, so we knew we couldn't yell freedom and fun, because then it's, we're narrowing. So one of the other interesting things about Stuckey's is they have a long tradition of the road trip. And I'm like, so the through line is road trip. And why the through line is road trip is because of all the things you could do in America today. That is the most independent. Like, you get to make all the decisions, including how much you're going to speed. You get direction, all the rest of stuff. And they're generally fun, because you're generally driving to something that you want to do, or driving back from something. Whether that is a road trip to your grandmother's house, or that's I'm 20 and I'm going on a road trip to spring break. Who doesn't have a good time in a road trip? Now, I have had people say, I don't like road trips. And again, I get to people, there's 330 million Americans. We're not all going to love everything, but we are interested, all of our clients are interested in selling into the big fat middle. And we'll take the extremes. And if you don't like Chipotle, or you don't like Apple computers, or you don't like Audi cars, or any of the other client, or Stuckey's, or any of our other clients, that's okay with us, because we got lots of people. If it was Denmark we were only selling into, there's only 4 million of those. We got to get at least a bunch of them. It's America. We're fine. We'll find somebody.
Got it. All right. So Paul Enriquez, also on the Think Northwest board, asking if you have a supportive deck that includes all the support for your stated facts and studies. It would be great support for members trying to leverage when potentially trying to pitch this in their organizations. That's probably more of an ask than a question.
So Paul, you made my heart so happy, because you asked for the footnotes, because marketing people will sit there and tell you. So I do have a deck that is 100% footnoted. Again, University of Chicago MBA, where God even has to bring data to the table. Like, we just don't believe anything. So I'm with you, brother. And
wait a minute, you said God has to bring data to the table at the University of Chicago. Did Ditka study there?
100%.
Ditka started. Ditka's God in Chicago.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Good. So
yes, we have that. And yes, I'm glad to share. And yes, it is all footnoted, and all not footnoted with us, right? Because everyone who's in an agency knows exactly what an agency study is worth when the agency gives it to you. So this is all third party. At this point, word of mouth has been around. Well, let's see, we've been around 25 years. So the academic study of word of mouth has probably been around 21, 22 years. So there's lots of really good data on this. It's solid.
Cool. Sean Simon.
Hi, Sean.
Do you approach B2B differently than B2C?
Oh, Sean, This is the other money question, dude. Smart thinking. It works even better in B2B than B2C. Because if I've got 330 million Americans that could buy a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, I only have 110,000 North Americans that are going to buy a flu testing system for hospital level stuff. So the great thing, so the perfect target has a couple of different pieces to it. The perfect target for word of mouth, they co-locate, which is the fancy HBR word for they get together either physically or virtually somewhere all the time. So you know where they hang out. So do they co-locate, and do they have a pre-existing communications network? So you do. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to drive an hour and a half north, and I'm going to meet this guy, and his whole business is he sells stainless steel sinks to people to put in their house. That's his business. It's $170 million worth of stainless steel tanks every year. Huzzah. His number two competitor got bought by somebody else, and they are totally messing up the integration of those two firms. So he thinks there's a really big opportunity. You can't go on TV on a B2B side and talk to all these people. So how do we do a word of mouth campaign focused on the B2B side between one home builder to get one home builder to talk to another home builder like, hey, I really like these sinks versus this, and here's why. There are right around 72,000 home builders in the United States. We will build a pretty in-depth dossier on probably 20,000 of those. And so we'll have a very good idea who goes there and what goes on. So that story will be super tight, and everyone goes and hangs out, which, by the way, let me just since Sean asked a really great question, and thank you again for doing that. We'll go to trade shows with them next year or the next 2 years, because they'll sign a 2-year deal with us. We won't ever do any work in the booth. They'll have a booth. They have to have a booth, blah, blah, blah. We'll stand there in the Starbucks line, and we'll just stand in the Starbucks line and do something in the Starbucks line, get all these home builders to ask us questions. And when you get up there, we'll order our Starbucks, and then we'll walk away and we'll give it to somebody else, and we'll stand back in line and do the same thing. Why? Because we want to have conversations with people. Nobody really likes to talk to you at a booth. The long Starbucks line at 6:30, 7:30, 8:30 in the morning before you go in there, there's 50 people. They're all just hanging out doing something on the phone. If you're doing something with a stainless steel sink, and as long as you're not interrupting or intercepting anybody, somebody in the line will say, excuse me, what are you doing with that? Oh my God, so glad you asked. Blah, 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 blah. Right. Average word of mouth conversation is 32 seconds long.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Okay.
I need half a minute, and I'll tell you a story. And that's not me. That's like all advocates everywhere. Get in, get out. They're not looking for an 8-minute piece on, let me tell you all about Stuckey's and nuts, and, let me tell you about this. Like, it's really delicious. You should try one here. Try one. They're great.
32 seconds. Mark Moran, give me 32 seconds. I'll turn you into an Arsenal supporter. Okay, moving on. He's a Norwich guy. So Sean Howie, Sean Simon, Sean Howie.
Hi, Sean Howie.
Also on our board. How does this work on the other side when dealing with reputation management? Complaints and unhappy users can be part of the mix. And then Amir, I'm going to ask your question to wrap it up.
All right. Oh, is it they going to ask the de-influencer question? Because that's
no. Amir's got a great
because
question.
That's completely fake and a lie and all kinds of fun stuff. All right. So here's the thing. Advocates have 3 different personality traits that drive them. They like to try new things because they're new. They love to share stories with their friends, and they're intrinsically motivated. Like Pew, when I say love, like the index value that an advocate gives, according to Pew Research, thank you for early asking for the footnote, is 315 when baseline is 100. That's the index value they give on how much fun, how much joy they get in sharing a conversation, sharing a story with somebody else in a conversation. So what happens with advocates when they don't like your thing? They do the unkindest thing at all that they can think of. They don't talk about you at all. So reputation management, when it comes to advocates, most advocates will not show up in your life, either calling you on the phone, coming to your house and say, dude, you know what I hate? Blah. Because nobody needs more anxiety. Nobody needs more negativity in their life. Everybody is for neutral or for positive. So I live in Atlanta. So if somebody comes to my house and say, oh, traffic in Atlanta is so terrible, blah, blah. I mean, like yes, okay, we all know. And so blah, blah, blah. So you're not bringing me anything new. But if you show up at my house and you say, oh, dude, it used to take me 32 minutes to get from Decatur to Sandy Springs, but now they just cut a new road and it's now only 27 minutes. Like, where is this miracle flyway and how do I get to take it? Do I need to pay special money? Right? Because you just cut, back when you used to commute, you just cut 15% off of my commute time.
Mm-hmm.
So on reputation management, most advocates will not talk about it, which is why this whole concept of de-influencing is completely wrong. What it basically is in the world of influencers, which are mostly just paid broadcasters. So think about this. You're a paid broadcaster and you're always saying these things, right?
Right.
If you want to get noticed, say the opposite. It's the old pundit trick. Like when everybody is saying yes, you say no. Or when everyone's saying this person is going to be governor, you like, no, Jesse the Body Ventura is going to be governor of Minnesota. I promise. And you're like, that's insane.
I
but
called
then
that.
It works. And you're like, you're a genius. So that's the whole, basically that's just people who suck so bad at being a broadcaster that they have to go negative in order to get people to pay attention to them.
Well, you're right. I did suck as a broadcaster, but I did pick. I just said there is a school of thought that there is a good chance that Jesse Ventura wins governor of Minnesota. And yeah, I was in the newsroom that night. That was wild. That's another story for another time. I'm going to ask Amir's question here.
Okay.
And then I'm going to ask you to sum up real quick because this is Pacific Northwest. I know you love the Pacific Northwest and we love you for that. But I'm going to ask you the Rainier story. So Amir, this is a great question. So Ted, you mentioned having a frank conversation with a friend that's a CMO about word of mouth and why that's necessary. What's your advice on getting the layers of folks leading up to the CMO on board?
Oh, so hard, right? So you got a couple of problems. So we have three kind of clients, right? We have people that are just hosed. And when we started this thing almost 5 years ago, we, that's basically who our clients were. Pabst Blue Ribbon beer or Rainier. Like, I don't know, this thing is dying. We can't stop it. Now, basically, we have two types of clients. One, I am this level in the company, and there are 9 of us. And there are 3 above me, and then there's the CEO. So I need to do something that's going to differentiate me. And also, when they're expecting 4% growth, I can maybe get 9. Okay? And by the way, word of mouth marketing is cheap versus broadcast. So I can also be super budget friendly. Okay. And then you also get the other people that you get are people that just really want to do good work and are willing to go and try different things and say, to heck with not my career, but my role in this company is to do new things that work. And I'm not really worried about bringing in the new. Now, not everybody at the company is like that. And if everybody at the company was like that, the company probably wouldn't be successful. So you need A's, B's, C's. I want to do new. I want to do old. There has to be good creative tension. But your question, Amir, is the hard one. And so what you have to do is you have to show them how the thing that they're working on, if they could also be supportive of word of mouth, that their thing, their billboard, their radio, their TV, their whatever is going to win whatever trophy they want to win, that will be more effective and they will get to do more of them if there's conversation swirling around, and that conversation about the thing is where word of mouth comes in. Most of the people that I deal with, Amir, are senior leadership. So I get CEOs and I get CMOs, and sometimes I get people like that are direct reports to one of those two who will come in on the innovation side or the let's do something different side. That's who our clients are. So my job, like when Zanger calls, he's like, you want to talk to the people? I'm like, sure. I'll talk to anybody about word of mouth because I never know who's going to be in the audience. I can't tell who's ready to draw their sword and do something different. I mean, you mentioned one of my 3 favorite cheese companies in the whole United States. And I already talked about Gary Fish at Deschutes. Like Gary knows about us, and when he's ready, he'll call us. And until
Mm.
he's ready, I can't do anything that's going to make him more ready, or CBA or Nike or anybody else. And some people don't need us. And some people, we can't help them. I mean, there are lines, just to speak about Nike, there are lines at Nike that we can't help because they are undistinguishable from anything else. And Nike's done a good job about distinguishing other things. Do they have some things they could do better? Hell yeah. Less about broadcast, more about conversation. But they're pretty good on the conversation stuff. Microsoft, our friends in Seattle, I think they really turned around by basically making products that were more talkable and then talking about them to people instead of trying to do something like maybe a search engine that was half-ass at best versus the competitors who were out there at the time, and that you were going to spend a bunch of money on an NFL sponsorship. And then when people went and tried your product, it wasn't nearly as good as the other thing. So all that money is just wasted.
I worked on a project for Bing in 2010. We got some of that sweet money.
The
buzz was palpable. The buzz was palpable. It was 2010. It was 13 years ago. Man, that was fun though. Oh my gosh.
Hey, oh my God. Working on that program when they did all the stuff and the big.
Oh, it's a blast. Yeah. It was a blast.
Must have been great. Didn't sell more stuff because at the end of the day, CEOs report to boards and boards say, did you sell more stuff to more people more often for more money?
Yes.
If you did, awesome. They don't care about anything else.
Right.
And so therefore the market doesn't care about anything else. Therefore, that's what the job is.
Okay. Real quick, tell us the Rainier story because, again, it's very well documented that you love us. We love you. Now, what was the Rainier story?
All right. So
how did you get Rainier back to square one?
So Rainier is owned by the Pabst Brewing Company. Correct. And so we did PBR. That was our very first client. And the board was super excited about the results. And there's a guy the inside guy was Neil Stewart. He worked for the company. And I just started Fizz. So it was me and a napkin and saying, I know this will work. And the CEO of the Pabst Brewing Company, Brian Kovalchuk, said, I have no idea if you're an idiot or a genius, and I got to go to this next meeting about Old Milwaukee and our new TV spots. So I'll give you 3 markets in two months. And so we worked from there, and it was a thing. So then the board, Neil wants a raise, and I would like to be making a lot more money with this client. And so we said, hey, everyone wants to get paid more and paid for our results. And the board basically came back and said, we think you just got lucky because Ashton Kutcher is wearing a bunch of trucker hats. And I was like, that's your answer. And there was a little bit more nuance, but not much. And so Neil and I figured out how to go back, and we went to the CEO and said, okay, look, we think they're wrong. We're willing to make a bet. You give us a brand, you give us a year on any brand. We get to pick the brand. You give us the year, you fund it at this level, and the one that we picked was Rainier. So we went, and so back in the day, I mean, so y'all just to remember, this is me. So it's me. I haven't even hired my second employee yet, and Neil. And so we go, and we're staying at the Embassy Suites in the Pearl, which was a nice old hotel that Embassy Suites bought for cheap. I don't even know if it's still an Embassy Suites.
Oh, it's technically close to the Pearl. It was Pearl adjacent. I know what you mean though. Yeah.
Fine. Technically, whatever.
I'm just saying.
We could walk to the places. And then so we go there, and we're doing a little work, and there's no Rainier up there because it's a Seattle thing. So we go to Seattle, and we're just going to bars, and we're just talking to people. And one day, Neil and I are talking to these group of people, and we mentioned Rainier. And this guy at the other end of the bar stands up and goes, Rainier beer, just like that, which was basically the audio from an old TV commercial from the 70s, okay? Yeah. Where the guy's in the motorcycle and little Doppler effect, and the motorcycle's coming down from Matt Rainier, the Rainier beer. And so I'm like, oh my God, there's fandom. All right, so where there's fandom, there's talk. Where there's talk, there's word of mouth. And where there's word of mouth, there's success. So we're like, okay. So we go and we say, all right, all this stuff. And the reason that everyone in Seattle was so pumped up about nostalgia for Seattle at the time was at the same time going on, there was a big California migration. And so traffic was changing, property values were changing, all these other people who, why are you here? All the rest of this stuff. So we said, let's find all the old Rainier stuff that they're doing, and the Pabst Brewing Company, as part of its thing, had basically stopped doing anything. They took the big R off of the building that was right on the I-10. I mean,
5. Yep, Tumwater.
Yeah,
Yep.
I-5, thank you.
Yep.
Well, if you put two I-5s together, you get I-10.
That's true. Yeah. That's good math.
Put I-5. So we brought all that stuff back, including the running of the Rainiers, which if you're not from Seattle, you might miss this. There were 5 different people who dressed up in different costumes about beer and about Rainier, and they would just run through the streets of downtown Seattle. Now, when Seattle is a little teeny tiny thing and Boeing is the biggest deal in the world, then that's all fine. But this is a big, I mean, Microsoft is here. This, we got all the sports, and it's great, and we're a big American town. And we do this, and everybody who was of there was like, great. And Rainier is also a domestic sub-premium. So it's the beer to drink if you're local and you're drinking more than 20. So it doesn't cost much to try one. So we did, and they told 2 friends, and so on and so on. And now my favorite fact about Rainier, now this is not 20 years ago, but it's probably 15 years ago now. Today in Alaska, in one day of Rainier sales in Alaska, equal the entirety of all the Rainier that they sold system-wide and across the entire United States the day before we started. So if you look at where, and this is Alaska, so it's like at one point, I don't know what it is like today because I haven't seen IRI numbers for a minute, but at one point, Rainier was like a top 5 beer in Alaska, and you got to ship all that stuff way up there. So that's not even talking about Seattle and Washington State and the Pacific Northwest. That's like way at the outer rim of our little Pacific Northwestness is Alaska, and way up there, and they're drinking the heck out of Rainier.
Wow. That's something. Yep. That is something. Well, Ted, we went over an hour. We'll go ahead and send you the difference in the form of a Tillamook gift certificate.
Oh, please do.
Or gift card. See if they exist.
That would make me so happy.
Yes. But thank you all very much. Please let everybody know how they can get in touch with you.
So if you Google search Ted, Wright, and Fizz, you'll find it all. But the easiest way is ted@fizzcorp.com. So FIZZCORP.com. But the Googles will help you. So Ted, Wright, and Fizz, or Ted, Wright, and word of mouth, and you'll find everything going back 25 years.
All right. And then for people who heading down to Atlanta, get in touch too, because
come on by. Always glad to share tequila for sure.
I love it. I love it. And I got to check on that warrant for my arrest in Mexico.
You did.
I will check on that. Ted, thank you so much. Thank you for being part of our community. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. More Think Northwest Now is happening next week. We are talking to Nike's former historian, Scott Reams, about Nike's history and influence in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. On behalf of everybody on the board of Think Northwest, thank you, Ted, again, and we'll see everybody later.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.